A lifelong resident of Fulton, Tim Carroll has been interested in lake restoration and maintenance ever since he had his first job here at Lake Neonawanna. He has a background in wetland ecology and is currently working with Lake Neonawanna and its restoration. I'd like to welcome Tim Carroll to the porch.
Thank you very much, Matt. As Matt said, my background is in biology and wetland ecology. I spent the last 30 years working in a nuclear power plant, making nuclear power safe for you. How I got there from ecology to nuclear power is a story for another show. So if you want me back, let me know, Matt.
Sure do.
I'm going to give you a little bit of background about the lake itself and lake ecology. So if I wax a little pedantic, forgive me. I did do a little teaching when I was in grad school. And then a little bit about lake restoration and particularly Lake Neonawanna and maybe what the future holds. The lake itself, Lake Neonawanna, is about a 750-acre lake, depending on what research you look at, in the shallow basin, Old Glacial Lake Iroquois. The maximum depth is probably 10 to 12 feet right now, although it's been recorded to be up to 13 feet in the past. It's obviously a very shallow lake with a constant temperature. There are 4 inputs to the lake: Somerville Creek, Sheldon Creek, Lay Creek, and what's kind of referred to as Granby Creek in some of the studies you look at. And the one outlet that everybody knows, Tannery Creek, that drains it to the river. There's also inputs from spring-fed springs underneath the lake, although nobody's been able to really identify exactly where those springs are to this point. The fact that the Fulton Woolen Mill up until the 50s withdrew about 2 million gallons a day from the lake indicates that there are probably some other alternate sources of input to the lake along with those springs. So there is good evidence that the springs are there. The lake itself, being a shallow lake with pretty much a constant temperature, is what's known as hypereutrophic. Now, when I was studying, it was called cultural eutrophication. Scientists prefer to call it hypereutrophic now. Now, imagine that your kid is a lake, and you give him a bowl of Fruit Loops and a couple of Hershey's bars and send him over to the neighbor's house. That kid's kind of running all over the place. That's what happened with Lake Neonawanna. As a very shallow lake, it wants to become a wetland. It's very high in nutrients. If you buy your fertilizer at the store, you see the NPK on there, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the potassium. These nutrients are what feeds the lake. It causes excessive algae, excessive plants, that sort of thing. Let's say the lake just wants to die. It wants to become a farm. It wants to become a wetland. It just wants to be out of there. So the way the lake stands right now, because of inputs from farms and such out in the Granby area off of Sheldon Creek, it's called hypereutrophic. It's just accelerating beyond what nature would actually do for that lake. And that's what's caused the problems. Let me refer to my cheat sheet for just a second here. Some studies have been done on the lake itself. You understand now what hypereutrophic is and why this lake is going like it is. The first indications there were some problems with the lake were back in the 50s. A lot of it was fish population, stunted fish and such, and a number of studies were done from 1950 to 1970, particularly looking at the fish populations in the lake. Fishing was the main recreation at the lake at the time, along with swimming and such. So restoration techniques were looking at how are we going to make the fishery better. That was the primary use of the lake. Once the 70s came around, started having problems with water milfoil, a submerged vegetation that took up about 25 to 50% of the lakeshore. That impacted boating and swimming particularly. If anybody remembers the lake who actually went down there, I worked there for a couple years. There was a large bed of milfoil to the left of the lake and a large bed to the right of the lake, which we always kind of enjoyed taking some of the women lifeguards and throwing them in there, watching them scream and stuff. You know, today we'd be thrown in jail as being bullies, but back then it was the height of beach etiquette to do that. So once this milfoil was identified, the city was undergoing several different ways to try and treat that. They did harvesting with mechanical harvesters. They used chemicals to treat the lake to try and kill it off. But again, being a hypereutrophic lake is a very, very difficult thing to deal with. As this went on through the 80s, off and on efforts went through to try and take care of the water milfoil problem. The latest effort now has been because of the hypereutrophic activity of the lake, is blue-green algae. Now, blue-green algae, again, I learned it as blue-green algae. Now it's preferred to be called cyanobacteria. Apparently the blue-green lobby got their word across. They don't like to be called blue-green anymore. So if you hear me refer to cyanobacteria, the papers will still see blue-green algae on occasion. I think most of you remember back in about 2004, there were some deaths in the lake. A yellow lab was down there and apparently may have been poisoned by consuming some of the water, some of the scum that floated up with the algae in it, and several geese washed up. So the restoration efforts at that point shifted from originally for restoring the fishery to making swimming and boating more available to basically public health issues. Obviously, swimming has been banned in the lake since mid-90s, maybe early 90s. At the time, originally because of turbidity issues, the state health department requires a certain visibility in the water. I think if you drop a disc in the water, and if they can see it at 4 feet, you're allowed to swim there. But because of turbidity issues with all the sediment coming in from across the lake, swimming was banned. And then with the health issues with blue-green algae, it's just become a much more severe detriment to the lake, and a little more call for performing some restoration efforts. And as you see, last year, they finally began some dredging. There are a number of in-lake techniques you can do to try and restore it at this stage of its development. There's aeration. You can put alum to try and filter out some of the phosphorus that's in the lake, which is really the limiting factor that drives a lot of this cyanobacteria growth. Dredging. You could raise the lake if you wanted by putting an outlet dam on Tannery Creek. Of course, that would impact an awful lot of people on the lakeshore negatively. I think if some of you remember back in 1972 when Hurricane Agnes came through, the lake level was over the road at the base of the football or the softball field down there, which was probably closer to what the original lake level might have been before it was drained partially back in the 1800s to drain some of the swamps because they're concerned about malaria and other insect plagues. And additionally, again, in the early 70s, I believe, I'm not really sure what the reason was. If Percy Patrick was alive today, I think he could let us know about that. But now it's gotten to the point where, thankfully, some money has become available for both Fulton and Granby to be doing some dredging. Dredging itself may or may not alleviate the problem. So there are a couple theories on this. There's the whole hypereutrophic thing. I have a theory based on a personal experience myself. Back in about 1980 or 81, I was out on the lake quite a bit with friends of mine. That's where I learned to ski. We were out there with some friends who were girls, not girlfriends, and a couple cases of old Vienna splits. Now, we decided to do a little swimming in the lake, and my friend, who remained nameless at this point, decided at that point it would be fun to pretend he was Moby Dick, at which point he dropped his shorts, nothing underneath, and started kind of porpoising with this nice white posterior flashing occasionally. While I was in the water, suddenly his shorts floated up next to me. I thought, well, I think I can be kind of funny here. I'll just grab his shorts and dive down and stick them in the mud. Well, we were never able to find his shorts. He walked out of the lake with his t-shirt pulled on over his pants and drove off to his house to get a replacement pair of pants, apparently. But it was shortly thereafter that the lake started having problems, and I was wondering, did I plug a spring with my friend's shorts? So a couple years ago, I got my GPS unit out and figured, okay, I'll take my kayak and run on the lake and see if I can find these shorts. Nothing showed up, and when I told my son about it, he goes, what are you using the GPS unit for, Dad? Well, not being technologically savvy, I said, doesn't that stand for got plugged somewhere? Well, never did find the problem, so I have to believe now that it's really a hypereutrophic system that's just looking to senesce itself. Anyways, finally Fulton and Granby, getting back on track, were able to secure some money through Patty Ritchie and grants and such to begin an actual dredging. What the dredging hopefully will do, number one, eliminate much of the sediment that's causing the turbidity, create a greater depth in the water, which will help reduce water temperatures, increase oxygen levels, which will be a little bit detrimental to blue-green algae growth, increase the visibility in the lake, which will allow swimming again, and create better habitat for the fisheries and that sort of thing. The main goal is to really establish a viable lake for recreation activities. For those of us who have been here a number of years, we all have very, very fond memories of that lake, correct? The goal of this whole dredging operation is to really restore the lake to its future, or its former glory. There's a lot of work to do yet. They were able to take out 20,000 cubic yards last year. This year, money has been available again to do the dredging. The city of Fulton will be doing their dredging the way they did last year, pumping it out through the geotubes, draining it, beginning around July 15th. And the town of Granby will be beginning about the same time out on their end of the lake, pumping it onto the shoreline, letting the water drain out of the sediments, and then recapturing the sediments as they want. I think we have an obligation as ourselves to kind of be able to bring this back. It would be nice, Fulton has had their tough times, obviously, over the years. It would be nice to have these amenities, the parks, the beaches, and things like that, ready and available if the economy does turn around here, if developers want to come in and take a look and see that it is a vibrant community with good schools, nice recreation opportunities, a lake that people are actually using and boating on and swimming in. I think we all have great memories there, and it'd be nice to give people the opportunity to have those same memories. I'm sure my dad has great memories of rolling a hoop and stick down the street in Watertown. If I'd gotten that as a Christmas gift when I was a kid, I don't think I'd have any fond memories of that. But I'd like to let the kids today have that opportunity to have memories of swimming and fishing and playing around the lake as we did. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim, and thanks for sharing, and thanks for your commitment, too. I really appreciate your investment.